incident was about to take place that would shake the foundations of the civilized world.
It is time to open your mind. Time to discover your divine self as we navigate this holographic matrix together. Strap in, Cosmic Family, as we slide through this wormhole of cosmic information together in search of the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
It's time to go inside the matrix. With your host, Jimmy Brent.
All right, welcome to Inside the Matrix. Today, our guest is Alexandra Bruce, and we're so happy to have her here with us. Alexandra is the founder and publisher of the popular alternative news website Forbidden Knowledge TV, which began in October of 2010 with 0 startup funds. The site grew very rapidly and strictly by word of mouth, receiving an average of 1.2 million monthly page views and robust advertising revenues. In 2015, Forbidden Knowledge TV Google earnings dropped 90% without warning or recourse, in a trend that began to affect an increasing number of websites and YouTube channels for independent news services. By 2016, it had become known as the adpocalypse, which I'm sure many of you have heard about it already. We've talked about it on the show. This trend has escalated into periods of mass deplatforming of figures in the alternative media, most notably Alex Jones. And it has since emerged that this unilateral corporate censorship aimed at anti-war, anti-establishment, anti-Hillary publishers is part of a concerted effort put forth by George Soros's funded Media Matters nonprofit organization that is at war with anything it deems to be conservative and especially anything considered to be pro-Trump. Alexandra has a unique perspective on the creeping fascism we're seeing in America today. After attending high school in Brazil during the final days of the CIA-installed military dictatorship there, Alexandra's background includes working in independent films and TV for 3 decades. She was a prolific director of music videos during the golden age of hip-hop. After having been one of the 3 original founders of MTV's highest-rated show at that time, Yo MTV Raps, she is also the author of 6 nonfiction books. Alexandra was a producer on the feature film Heal for Free in 2014, released by Gaia M. Vivendi Entertainment, starring the late Apollo astronaut and founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, Edgar Mitchell. Alexandra, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
That's quite a resume you have, and it's you're very diverse in your talents and abilities. And I know myself personally, I've been following your blog for a long time, and I thoroughly enjoy all the interesting information that you find, and especially your memes are second to none. And I nominate you for the best memes on Facebook.
Great.
Because you really are. And I mean, I've spit out my coffee more than once looking at your memes in the morning. So, it's really great. But let's start out, if you wouldn't mind, let's go back and let's talk about, your involvement with MTV and some of the things that you did there, and then where that led you to and how you became a person that is very interested in the truth, as you obviously are. Like a lot of us, we're kind of obsessed with finding the truth and also, trying to seek remedies for the current situation we find ourselves in. So if you wouldn't mind, just take us back a little bit and give us some of your background.
Well, I went to Brown University after I graduated from that high school in Brazil. And Brown is like the most left-wing university possibly in the United States.
Wow.
And the thing is that to me, I didn't, I was raised very much in that milieu. I was raised very much in a, I lived in, before I was in Brazil, I was in Chicago. At the school where Ayanna Pressley went to, and the publisher of Slate, and like all of these people who are like Daryl Hannah went there, Jennifer Beals went there. So it's just like also just like a conclave of socialism. Okay. And even my own grandmother was a communist. She actually went to jail in Brazil for being briefly
Wow.
for harboring a communist. So to me, that was like what normal was left. Okay. And I'll try to take this one step at a time and not jump all over the place. But so the most natural step was to go to Brown University, where I majored in basically semiotics. I majored in semiotics, which is what Antifa is all about. Okay.
Wow.
So then I majored, which is what you had to do at Brown to do film production. Which it's you read a lot of Marx and Freud, and you deconstruct capitalism and the patriarchy and all of that stuff, and you break it down, and I think it's moved on to extreme intersectionality and this whole transgender thing that's occurred. That's I'm not in college, I haven't been in college in a long time, but that's where it's gone.
Sure.
And who knew? I mean, who knew it would, like I thought I was left wing. I'm not left wing anymore, compared to these people.
Yeah.
So, I was doing independent film. I was working, as a PA, and then I got to be in the art department. And then, talking to the crews, there was, they were saying there's a Run DMC film. And I was like, oh, awesome. Because I did a year in France. And when I came back, the music is so horrible in France. They have no music. It's a nightmare. So when I came back, it was Walk This Way with Run DMC and
Aerosmith.
Right. And I was just like, this is like the greatest. It's the most American thing I've ever heard in my life. I'm so glad to be home,
Right.
And so when I heard that they were making a movie, I was like, this is great. And I went and I interviewed and I got the job of art director on a movie called Tougher Than Leather with Run DMC and the Beastie Boys. And it was amazing. It was a crappy, horrible film, but it was such an amazing experience. And I got to meet all of these people really before they were very famous, Mm-hmm. So I was really good friends with Russell. Russell kept people close because they skyrocketed. Russell Simmons became like the mogul of hip hop, and going through all of these changes and becoming a multi-millionaire. And so, he liked to keep the people who were friends with him before, that he trusted.
Sure.
And so literally, like I was his walker, for years. In the scene, in New York City, which was just amazing. It was amazing. And that it was on one of those nights that I saw Donald Trump out with Bruce Willis. They were definitely hoeing. They were definitely out hoeing. And, and we were laughing at them. It's like 3:00 in the morning,
Trolling. Yeah.
We were laughing at him. But so that was my opinion of Donald Trump, back then. So then what happened? So then because of, working and knowing everybody in that world just as it was happening and really being a super fan because basically what hip hop was back then in the late 80s is what being a Trump supporter is today. Okay. It's completely dissident, it's truth telling and it's completely rebellious. It's an act of rebellion to support the president of the United States right now.
Absolutely.
And, I'll keep telling the story. So then because of that, I knew everyone. And I got one of the extras in the film had been, I had worked as an intern. I had an internship during Christmas vacation, my sophomore year at college at MTV. Also back, when MTV was just starting. So, a few years later, I was actually already married. I was married before I graduated from college. Mm-hmm. And I ran into, he was on the set, and I had to, as the art director, I was involved with, supervising his wardrobe and all this stuff. And he was like, I'm starting this new show, and it's the rap show or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, awesome. So then after that movie, I went and started interning at Yo MTV Raps. I became an associate producer. I was really, I was the person who got Fab Five Freddy to agree, because I was friends with him, and he was like, he was skeptical, but he decided to do it. And then it was just, that show was so successful. And MTV did receive racist stuff, I mean, if you might recall, I think the only black people on MTV back then were, I think, Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie. I think that was it.
That's right. Yep.
And but it didn't matter. I mean, it just was more successful than anything else had ever been at the time. And so I was there for 6 months, but I was getting so many directing jobs. I just thought, I want to do that. So I started my own production company. I was, 21 or 22 or something at the time.
Wow.
And yeah, now all of a sudden I'm paying like 200 people a month because I was so busy. And I was, I had my own company, and I was directing and producing and editing, and because that's, I learned those skills, with all the intersectionality and Marxism. I also learned, how to edit and stuff. So I did that for a while, and I observed the thing sort of get taken over and become this gangster rap thing, and really transform into something that it really hadn't been. It really focused on more of a negative thing than on more of kids breaking out of that. It just wanted to reinforce that instead of be free of that.
Yep. And that was part of the concerted effort to get people in jail for profit.
Right. Yes, that was during the, that was Bill Clinton was president, and indeed. Well, I guess Bush was still there, but it was the changeover.
Mm-hmm.
And that's back when the CIA was dealing crack in
L.A. Yep.
Yeah. And created that whole thing, and it was tragic. There was one time I was flown to Dallas to direct a video for a rap group there called Nemesis. And I get there and they say, well, because there were 3 artists. I had the playback tape that, I came with that. The record company gave me the playback reel that they have to lip sync to. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, this guy's in jail. And I'm like, what are you? And he's like, when is he getting out? I mean, he's in for 30 years.
Oh my God.
And it's like, oh my God. So
you mean he won't be in the video?
He can't be in the video. So they just, one guy did both of the guys' lyrics. Mm-hmm. And these guys were, so we were followed by cops the whole time. And they were crack dealers, but they were actually lovely. And it really broke my heart. Like, I had seen, there were some rough people I had seen in New York, but these were really, they were still totally dealing crack, these people. And I literally cried the whole flight home. It was so tough. And then, I don't know, I was just worried, there was just a lot of negativity in there. The truth hurts sometimes, and then just, that the whole music video format went away, as you know. I mean, it's.
Yep.
I mean, back then it was basically every artist got a few grand. They got a few, maybe 50 grand in their record deal, where it would come off their royalties. The label would pay half, and the other half would come off their royalties. A lot of people don't understand. They think that MTV created those videos. No, those videos are made by the record company, and they're financed. It's a promotional budget, and
yep.
The standard deal was that half of it came out of the artist's royalties, and half came out of the record company's promotional budget. And And so, that began to just wane and go away. And then what happens is that when I have a reel that has a lot of angry black guys jumping up and down and exploding cars and, car crashes and people jumping out of airplanes, they didn't want to hire me to do any, you get very pigeonholed.
Right.
And even though I was a white woman, it didn't seem, which was just insane to begin with. I would get to places and they're like, "You're the director." And I'm like, so, whatever. So, I couldn't get arrested basically. And so I ended up, moving into other things like writing and actually, as far as directing anymore, I mean, I've done unit production management and second AD or first AD and things, but getting directing jobs, I just sort of stopped. It's funny because now, women direct. People, they wouldn't get hired for directing, but back then it was very, very rare for a woman to be directing.
Well, especially in that genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I started writing books. It's funny because then people ask me, how did that happen? And it's just very weird because I never asked. And that was also sort of the rap thing too. I was commissioned, I mean, most of the jobs I got, they gave to me. I mean, I did compete for a few things, so you'd have to write,
like a storyboard or something.
Yeah. And, but most of the ones, it was just like they'd seen my other work and they just hired me because they wanted me to do, come up with something for them. And so that's what it was with books too. I never, asked to write a book. It was like I was asked to write every single book I wrote. And so that's how that started. And so it's when people ask me, how do you break into that? It's like, I really don't know what to say.
Well, that's a good way to do it. What was the subject matter of your book?
So the first book was crazy. It was about the Montauk Project and the Philadelphia experiment.
Oh, yeah. I met Al Bielek in around 1990.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that was when that story was just sort of beginning to break. I think the first book came out in 92. So mine, I was commissioned in, I think, 98, and it took me a couple of years because I was working full time. So it didn't come out. It came out in January 2001. And so, yeah, that was really crazy, hanging out with those guys and getting into that field of parallel universes and
time travel and yeah.
Whoa. I mean, basically, you got sucked into this vortex because everything is true in a parallel universe, basically.
Yep.
You start getting sucked into there, and that was really pretty nuts. And another thing is that I've been a UFO experiencer since I was like 12. And I had a very, very intense experience while living in Brazil still when I was 13 that lasted an hour. I was with my neighbor. The thing was massive. It got into the landing pattern at the local airport. It was right there. It was definitely trying to freak out the airplane,
Wow.
And so, I was open to this stuff. I discovered early on that talking about it was not socially acceptable, so I didn't. But then kind of when the music videos sort of wound down, I started to really plunge into that sort of thing. So that's how I ended up getting commissioned to write that book. I ended up meeting Peter Moon at one of those expos, a UFO expo. And we were talking, and he was like, "Hey, you should write the next book." And so that's how that happened.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. And so that was like 4 years of high strangeness, where literally like the barn doors of reality were blown off. And and then I got a real job. Then I was slinging. Then I worked at a very high level wine brokerage out in the Hamptons. I was selling like $2.5 million a month to these billionaires.
Hoity-toity, huh?
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of knew stuff about that. I took the course at Windows in the World, and I knew how to, I speak French, and so I totally could do it. And I was friends with the guy who owned the company, and so I did that for 5 years while also writing books.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's that. And then, I went to LA to work on a couple films, and I was not feeling LA at all, I have to say. And I can't even imagine what it's like now. I left in 2012. I couldn't really put my finger on it because I was still a registered Democrat. I voted for Obama the first time. In fact, my stepfather was a precinct captain. My parents had moved to Rancho Mirage, which is, near Palm Springs in the desert in California. Right. And so he was a precinct captain in that Riverside County over there, which had it was like Republican country back then. Now it is like totally flipped blue. Okay. And he did it. He flipped it.
Wow.
And so now what's happened is that I'm completely estranged from my family. So I'll keep going. So I'm publishing this, Forbidden Knowledge TV, .net. It's my website. It's a daily newsletter that goes out to subscribers. It's one, newsletter a day these days with a video and my commentary on it. Mm-hmm. And I was making awesome money doing that. For the first 5 years, I was making $15,000 a month with Google AdSense, and with half the subscribers that I have today. And I just thought, this is freaking great.
It's great, yeah.
So when my income plunged for no reason, the traffic was the same, everything was the same. It's just that somebody over at Google had just turned the switch off, and I seemed to be one of the first people that they did this to, because it was like the beginning of 2015.
Yeah, that is early on.
Yeah. So, I was like, I knew that it had to do with my content, but nobody would talk to me. Like, they were starting to contact me because this is, you hear about a lot of demonetization and stuff with people who are monetizing with YouTube. But actually, you make a lot more money. The split between you and Google is much better for the publisher when you have your own website and you're running, their ads on your website.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. So, and it's, and it's a different terms of service because you're not on their platform, because Google, YouTube is their platform. So it's kind of, they kind of didn't have to answer to me. They didn't, they were sort of bringing me into the fold and, hey, you should do this and you should do that. And all of a sudden, like, nobody will talk to me. And, the treatment that we've all come to hear about from everybody else. Right. But, it hadn't happened to anyone else yet. And I was like completely freaking out. And both of my parents are dying, and they proceeded to die. And then they both died.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's been pretty tough. I hear some music playing. You got to do some ads or something?
Yeah. We're going to be taking a short break here in just a second. You're listening to Inside the Matrix with our special guest today, Alexandra Bruce. She's sharing with us her story, and we'll continue that on the other side of the break, so please stick around with us. And I want to hear some more about your other books too, Alexandra, and then we'll continue on with, what's happened with Google and all of that nasty stuff. So stick around with us. We'll be right back in just a few. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're with Alexandra Bruce, our special guest today. And before the break, we were talking about some really interesting stuff. But I wanted to bring up once again, Alexandra's books. Now, the first one you had mentioned was about Montauk. And that in itself is a totally fascinating subject. And anybody who's seen the Philadelphia Experiment movie, from what I understand, the first 15 minutes of that movie, according to Al Bielek, was very accurate. But after that, it kind of went off into, I guess, fairyland or some crazy story.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, Bielek was, whatever, he had some issues.
Oh, he was severely dinked with. I mean,
yes.
When I met him, I could tell, like, it was almost like there was nobody home. I mean, there were still, he was pretty sharp mentally, but there was literally no emotional body there. I mean, it was nothing. It was like a void. And you felt like almost like you were talking to a computer, or
Yeah.
it was just all mental, on his level. No expression, no smile, no any expression of emotion whatsoever. It was just strictly information, and it was a little spooky, but you can understand it, going through an experience like that, could do that to you.
Well, Preston was the same way, actually. And it's interesting because now all three of them have died. The only,
Right.
Duncan Cameron died earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
And and Preston died late last year. And Albie like a few years ago.
Right.
The only one left now is Stuart Swerdlow. And he seems to be doing very well, actually.
Yeah, he seems to have his faculties still with him.
He's gone through weird, when he first came out, he plunged into some crazy, like he went to some crazy times, but he seems to be in a better state right now. So, so what I found, I discovered a different possible story about what it could have been. What I discovered through a guy named Bob Beckwith, who's probably no longer with us either, because he was 20 years ago, he was in his 80s. So he was a wonderkind who was working at Bell Labs when he was 23 years old during the war, and he was actually commandeered into the service, not to be deployed, but to work on secret projects to try to outwit the Germans. And in his case, it was, he says that the whole premise of the radar war didn't make any sense, because that really wasn't the issue. That was the main issue. It was really sonar and German subs blowing merchant ships out of the water, blowing civilians out of the water all over the place. And that they were off here. They landed not far from I'm in Long Island. I'm on the east end of Long Island, and these people came to sabotage the Nazis. Landed from a submarine. They swam to shore from a sub right here.
Wow.
And yeah, that's what some people say. Old timers in Montauk say that back during the war, like the amount of periscopes coming out of the ocean was like a daisy field or something.
Oh man.
So so he was working on a project, a Navy project, in a boat that was had been christened the USS Martha's Vineyard. It had been a private yacht, but it had been commandeered into the service by the Navy because it was a war. That they used to do that to people back then. And they had, outfitted it with the high-tech equipment at the time to do, what he said was to make these 3 counter-rotating fields. And, this was not his. This was the previous one. He said it was the size of a refrigerator. And he was working on this sonar project that actually was unsuccessful. But the guys, because this is what's mind-blowing to hear his retelling of it, was that there was no National Security Act yet back in, I think this was 1940. Mm-hmm. There was no National Security Act, so there weren't the systems of secrecy and classifications and sort of rules governing, all there was loose lips sink ships. I mean, that was it. But,
right.
Aboard the ship, lips would flap. And so these sailors were freaked out about what had happened 2 weeks previously on this previous experiment. And what they describe is what you hear about in the Philadelphia experiment. They basically, they looked out the window. The ship was back where they had been, like the previous time that they went to port in Newport News, Virginia. From Newport, Rhode Island, which is like 600, 700 miles or something. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys was embedded in the hull, in the deck. And they brought him to the area where they had to sand it off and repaint it And it was like the granularity of the language. He said, they showed me, the freshly painted splash cowling near the door. I mean, that's how he described it.
Oh,
yeah.
Weren't there several men that were
that's
embedded?
in the experiment legend,
Yeah.
maybe this kind of thing happened on the Eldridge or on another boat, but this was a different boat, and it was in Block Island Sound, not in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And so they had to sand, cut, saw, and then sand it down and repaint it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And so this was from the previous experiment. And then they showed him, they said it was like about the size of a refrigerator. And, it had been putting out 3 counter-rotating fields, which he believed, and he came up with his own. He was a contactee. It sort of came out, this guy, Bob Beckwith.
Mm-hmm.
He was sort of a Tesla-like person.
Well, didn't Tesla back out of the project because he thought it was dangerous to begin with?
I don't.
Because I had heard that early on.
Yes. Well, I do know. The only thing the hearsay from somebody whose grandfather was Tesla's intern at the University of Colorado was that he had helped Tesla develop the alloy, the filaments that were used in the Thomson tubes, the vacuum tubes that were used to amplify the field.
Right.
So this was a guy whose dad was actually the director of the project. This is a person who's really hasn't been written about, except for in my book, was Glenn Pruitt. And that was the craziest, that was the craziest experience of my life, was being friends with this guy. He weighed about 800 plus pounds.
Wow.
And he was a mega genius he was just so superlative in every way. Everything was just over the top with this guy. And his dad was the director of the Montauk Project. According to Al and everybody else, he was the guy who was in charge of hiring, firing, and paying personnel. And so where was I? Yeah. So then, this guy's father, Lee Pruitt. So that was Jack Pruitt was the director. Lee Pruitt, Jack's father and Glenn's grandfather, was Tesla's intern at the University of Colorado, and it helped him come up with, as I said, the filament, the alloy. And he said it was very interesting because Tesla sort of drew the molecule and he didn't know what it was. And Lee was, another genius, mega genius, and he helped him figure out what that would be. And they created that metallic alloy to be the filament inside the Thomson tubes.
Now, I just wanted to throw out there, because some people may not know what we're talking about, but what this device did was create a huge energy field, which surrounded a rather large naval vessel and made it disappear. And they did this on more than one occasion, right, Alexandra?
Well, I think so. I think they did it at least 3 times. Mm-hmm. But what Bob said is that he had a different take on it. He wasn't there, but from talking to the guys who had been, had seen their mate embedded in the deck, he said that he thinks that there was the ability to decouple from universal space, is how he called it. That you could create your own little bubble that became almost like a quantum particle, and that's why it would haphazardly appear, and usually would appear where it had been before, because it sort of had a resonance with where it had already been. Mm-hmm. So that's why it went back to where it had been a week, the last time that it was tied up. And so that's, he had this whole theory that he developed about divided space, universal space, being the one thing that is everything, all that is, mm-hmm. and being able to decouple a bubble off of that. And so he says that's what explains, UFOs being able to make, 90-degree turns and 45-degree turns without completely cracking up, because there's no inertia, because they're in their own bubble.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so that was crazy. And so then, I keep on doing these things that are going to destroy my ability to function in normal society. Because between directing hip hop videos and now time travel and Montauk and everything,
you can't go back.
Exactly. Then I was lucky enough. So I was one of these people. I was one of the first people to be on streaming video podcasts, starting in 1996, because the production company where I was working, a film production company, was in the same building where the disinformation company had a daily podcast. And so they would have me on. I was in the middle of writing this book, The Philadelphia Experiment Murder is what it's called. And, I'd be talking about that. And, it was like the show was called, what was it called? The Infinity Factory was the name of the show.
That is early on for streaming.
Yes. It's very chunky. I mean, you can still find it. It's very chunky style. So after working with them, and I was friends with the guy who founded that company, and so he gave me the opportunity to write some books for his company. And the first one was Beyond the Bleep. It was the film What the Bleep Do We Know?
Mm-hmm.
That was it was actually the first video that was really distributed through sort of social media, and that was back way back. That was like in 2003 and 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So it was still sort of MySpace. Facebook hadn't really fully taken off yet.
No, everybody was on MySpace then.
Right, but I did see it shared. That's the first time I saw it was shared on Facebook in 2004, and then I was called, and they hired me to write, to basically what the hell is this book about? Who are these people and what's really going on with this thing? Which was a crazy thing. It was made by the Ramtha people, by the Ramtha School of Enlightenment, and so that was all crazy. But there were some cool, there were definitely bona fide real physicists in there, and so it was talking about quantum physics basically, and but sort of melding that with new age, boomeritis is what Ken Wilber calls it. Boomeritis, which is like when you think that you can, change, that you can, make it stop raining or whatever. Maybe some people can, but this idea that you create your own reality, and that's true to some extent. But I think it's the meshing of the ego with the you is not the you that you think it is.
Right.
It's not your ego.
The ego is the construct. It's not you, the spirit, the right. Energetic field that gives you life.
Right. Exactly. And that's, I think, where people get tripped up with the you create your own reality gig, because they think, it's like wealth. What do they call it? Wealth consciousness or something? There's a lot of a lot of new age grifters sort of jumped on, to the you create your own reality thing. And from a cognitive psychology aspect, I think it's good to start thinking that way. Retrain yourself. I could use that right now, because I'm really beat up by
I always felt like, everybody has a certain ability to create on their own. And the more in touch you are with who that realness of you, the actual spirit, not the ego, or, it's a different thing. But the collective consciousness, to me, is what steers what happens in the world.
Yes, absolutely. And so that's what reality is. It's mass consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's why they're gaslighting us right now in the news. They care what we think. It matters. What we think.
It does matter. And
that's why they care. And they're gaslighting the crap out of us, because it matters what we think.
Because we will create what they want. They know that, as long as they put it out there and repeat it often enough.
Right.
And, we have to create that awareness so people know they're being played, they're being programmed into, the thought processes that will bring about our own demise, our own slavery that we have right now.
Yep. So that was Beyond the Bleep, and then the next book was, what did I do next? I translated a book about the Fatima apparitions from Portuguese into English, which was very interesting. It was by these Portuguese history professors, and so they were hesitant. Then when I went on the junket to interview about that, everyone wanted to make it be about the 20th century, UFO, like the alien abduction, scenario. And they didn't, they were like, yes, there are definitely aspects of that, but it's like, stop trying to put it into this 20th century American thing. It's like, because there might even be something that you can learn about this story. And that maybe this kind of thing has been going on for a long time, and that maybe you dress it up as a UFO thing when maybe these things might be more, what do they call it? Uranic, like they're coming out of the earth. Mm-hmm. Or something that's coming out of the earth. Like they talked about, like if you've ever heard of Kuan Yin, the Chinese goddess, the ascended goddess, right? Well, I mean, the thing is, that could be a Marian apparition, right? Only it's the Chinese version. And, people are dressing it up and, you're calling it an ascended master and somebody else is calling it Mother Mary. But, they're saying that it might be something more, primal than that. You're just dressing it up in something that makes sense to you. Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Because we have so many of the same stories that come out of different cultures that are really exactly the same. I mean, the whole story of Jesus, and this will really piss a lot of people off, but is identical to, from the virgin birth to, the crucifixion and all these other things of religious stories that came out of Samaria and Egypt and all these other places, absolutely identical stories. Yeah. And so these things keep being repeated over and over again, and they get different versions of, depending on what culture you're coming from. Yeah, what I've, because I did major in semiotics, which is a branch of linguistics, and I do speak 5 languages. Wow. And I do see everything, we're just hardwired that way. Everything, as far from a human perspective, is language. Everything is a kind of language. It's signaling to us in some way. It's saying something, not only to us, but to each other in their own way. Talking about plants, everything, and so, I think that there is like a primal architecture in our soul, in our spirit, and that it can look like father, son, and mother, it can look like that. And that's not to take away. I think that there's a lot of, I was brought up atheist, and I'm really gaining an appreciation for Christianity that I never had before. And I think that's very interesting. I think we're really in like the Great Awakening right now. And so I appreciate it and I get it. It's just another language. It's another way to interpret these very profound, it's God, it's all it is. It's just another language and another way to read the information that's there. Yeah, and it's who we are at the highest level. Absolutely. That's absolutely who we are. And the concept of Christ consciousness, that's who we are. Right. And when we connect with that, that's when all kinds of interesting things happen, and then we become aware of synchronicities and really cool things that happen. Once you elevate your awareness, you notice a lot more. Just walking down the street, you'll see things that'll just jump out at you and remind you of something that you needed to be reminded about. Or, there's all kinds of examples of things like that, but it's all part of, raising consciousness, awareness, whatever you want to call it. That's where we need to be at, and I know that's why you do what you do and I do what I do and so many other people as well, is we're all trying to get to the same place. We want to be free. We want to be, we don't want to be slaves anymore. We've been that way for so long. We've allowed it to happen. And now we've reached a point where we've got to
so much good information is coming out. We're becoming aware of what's been done to us, and now we have to stand up for ourselves.
Indeed. So, let's see, the next book. So I did the Celestial Secrets, I think. What's it called? Anyway, I was the translator on that, not the author. And then I was hired again by Disinfo to write Beyond the Secret, because then The Secret was the next movie that was also really capitalizing on, it was like, basically it's creating like a whole marketing movement, and outside of Hollywood.
Right.
To sell a film, basically. And this thing sold in the billions. Okay? The Secret did. I'm forgetting how many billion, but it was like, I think more than 6.
Oh, yeah, because it had that get rich quick angle to it. If you disavowed the spiritual aspect, there was that, hey, all I have to do is focus on, getting lots of money and I can do it, Right.
And so the thing is, that's almost the American religion. And it actually has its roots in movements like Christian Science and the positive Christian, what's it called? Unity Church, which is what Oprah is a member of today. And they were the people who were really behind pushing, like Beyond the Bleep got heavy push from the transcendental meditation people. Like they were like the ground troops to really push that like crazy. And in the case of Beyond the Secret, it was the Unity Church that really pushed that book.
Wow. Fascinating information, Alexandra. We're going to continue along these lines. We've got another break coming up in just a few seconds here. So you're listening to Inside the Matrix with our guest, Alexandra Bruce, and she's talking about the books that she's written. And we're going to continue along those lines in just a few minutes after these messages.
Inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix. With your host, Jimmy Brent.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Today we are with Alexandra Bruce, and we're continuing our discussion. Alexandra was sharing with us information about the books that she's written, so we're going to continue right along with that. Go ahead, Alexandra.
Okay, so just to finish up, I wrote a book about The Secret, which was this crazy, underground film that grossed billions and billions of dollars, worldwide through is like the first real streaming video. Well, the streaming video was good. And the next book that I was commissioned to write was from my days as a wine investment maven, was Investing in Liquid Assets, which was published by Simon & Schuster with my old boss.
Wow.
Basically, it was like how to make money with wine, because wine has outperformed the stock market for the last 160 years.
That's a big publishing house, too.
Yeah. So that was that. And then Disinfo hired me again to write the companion book to their film, 2012 Science and Superstition, which, got into like, what is 2012? What are they talking about? And all of it, like the Mayan calendar and everything, and all the major players, the major writers, theorists, and all of that, including Terence McKenna, who was fabulous, who I actually knew because my friends out here in Montauk had a DVD publishing. Well, actually, this was before DVDs. They produced documentaries and distributed them. It was called Mystic Fire Video, and so they did a lot of work with him. And everything with the Dalai Lama pretty much was done with them. And The Power of Myth with Joseph Campbell was theirs also.
Interesting.
So then after 2012, that's when I started publishing my website. And, getting into this deep state thing that's sort of hacking away at it. Like, what is it? Because I've been sort of skirting around it my whole life. As I said, I went to high school in Brazil, and Brazil definitely had been meddled with, by the American deep state. And so I grew up, I spent years, I lived in a military dictatorship, and I've seen what that looks like. And it's like, I don't want to see that again. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's a scary way to have to live.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't totally it wasn't like soldiers everywhere, but it really was. It was, like you'd see people like out of the corner of your eye, you'd see guys getting beaten up and thrown into vans and stuff. So yeah, I guess then we arrive at, the improbable, me being a registered Democrat, but, Hillary being, basically the Democrat candidate, and me not being able to support her. So I supported Trump. Like, there were some things he said that because of all this stuff that I've been publishing, like, I understood. And I was like, yeah, I agree. Let's not offshore everything to China. How about that? It's not the second law of thermodynamics that this is just the way it goes, Where, I had spent my whole life watching, my country get just like shipped offshore, So I endorsed Trump and where I'd been making a great living with advertising, I just boom, like I stopped making money with advertising. And I basically, and then it just gets, keeps on going and going. I have been deplatformed twice this year.
Well, that's when you know that your information is very good. Yeah, because that's what happens, unfortunately. And it's, I laugh. I'm not laughing because it's not really a laughing matter when it affects your.
It's like, when it's been very. I can't even tell you. Like, I'm almost like in a coma. Like, I have PTSD. I'm totally. You have no idea what it's like. Just, you're a good paying customer. You didn't do anything wrong. And they're like, we can't do business with you anymore.
Yeah. Well, you see where the power structure is, and that way you also know that what you're doing is very valid and that you're making a difference. Otherwise, they would not bother with you.
Right.
And, it's gratifying in a way, but it doesn't help.
It's my family where they don't even see it because they're so Trump deranged. They think I probably deserve it. Because I'm spreading fake news. Oh yeah,
the programming is intense, and it's amazing to me that I think even now, I support Trump, and I'm happy that he's disrupting all of the deep state's plans. That's thrilling to me. But I still have a lot of I guess people would call liberal ideas. I think everybody should have equal opportunity. I think that we shouldn't have homeless people living in the streets. There's a lot of social liberal. I think even some conservatives can get with that. We shouldn't abandon people. But what's happened with the Democratic side or the liberal side is they went from being sort of supportive of humanity to now this insane socialist, communist, Marxist thing where the government is so awesome they should take over everything and we're all just need to be taken care of by the government.
But they don't even believe it because they're doing the Green New Deal, which if you saw it, it was written by an 8-year-old, and it's just not. It's totally the UN. It's Agenda 21 is what it is. It's everything we've been hearing. We grew up during, the organic and the thing that the vegan, the vegetarian movement about how, each cow is, I don't know how many acres of, vegetables and how, it's ruining the world. Like, I grew up thinking I was, I didn't have kids because I thought I was going to ruin the world. Okay. Like, I was totally brainwashed with that decades ago. And they're acting like it's the Green New Deal. There's nothing new about it. This is old. This is some, old Club of Rome stuff.
Yep. Yeah, there is nothing new about the ideas, but their technology now is making them much more effective. Because we've got all the social engineering and the political correctness that goes on.
And you have, as Zach Voorhees, the Google engineer that came out, he's saying, basically the algorithms in search are actually and the Dr. Epstein who voted for Hillary and was a Hillary supporter for decades. There's pictures of him standing next to her. Okay. And he was saying she probably got about 14 million votes just from what they did to Google search.
Mm-hmm.
14 million votes that she should not have gotten.
Yeah, exactly. And their programs are very powerful. And now they've got it all automated with AI.
Yes.
And that's a scary thing because people, it's kind of like that old boiling frog metaphor, I guess you could say.
Boiling frog. I always thought the boiling frog was more like something that the right wing was going to do to you, and it's like it doesn't even matter, but it really is coming from the left now. I mean, it's total corporatism. I mean, Google it's the most fascistic entity. All those big tech companies are fascist because they're corporate and they can just like cut you off. You have no First Amendment rights. You have no civil rights. I mean, they deperson you.
Yep.
So the thing is that it's so hard for me as someone who comes from the left to, I only got radicalized and had my red pilled because I'm a publisher and I saw it happening to me firsthand. And then you see it happening at the level of the internet, the search, algorithms, being algorithmically censored, algorithmically deplatformed, depersoned, defunded. And like you try to explain this to a person who doesn't live online and they think you're a crazy person.
Yeah, of course. They don't see it unless it's not affecting them.
Right.
It's not real to them.
Watch cable news and they're listening to CNN do their crazy shit all day long. And they, like, to me, it's like, it's all the same thing. It's the same people. Look at what's happening. And they don't see it. It's wild. It's wild.
And this is all military, Google and Facebook and all this stuff. This was all started by DARPA. Mm-hmm. And originally it was LifeLock. And then when they stole, well, I don't know if this story is true, but there's a story about them stealing the software from Michael McKibben.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't either, but they did definitely something changed, and they went, oh, now we can really expand this thing, and that's when Facebook came out, and they always have these cutouts, like Zuckerberg. That guy couldn't write code to get out of his house, so
he can't talk. I mean, he can't even.
Yeah, the guy is a raving idiot, and all these cutouts like Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and Bezos and all these people. These are just front men. They don't know. They're nothing special. They're just a distraction as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah. I mean, if they're the wonderkins, and they make everyone else feel like losers because they're all like in their 20s and 30s. Right. They're worth $10 billion.
Yeah, and where'd all that money come from? Oh, well, the military and the banks. They're all working together on this.
Well, I mean, see, the thing is, the military doesn't really, I mean, the Geospatial Agency was huge, like, for example, in creating Google Maps. And I think it was more for what's about to happen, the Internet of Things, where we were really going to see, between that and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I mean, I was writing about this back in 2010, 2011. I was like, what are we going to do? Oh my God.
Yeah.
And it was like the first day, I think, that Trump was in office, he killed the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I was like, my God.
That was awesome.
Better than I thought. Like, this is incredible.
Right.
He saved us.
Yeah, that was a huge one because that just gave all the power to corporations.
Yeah, it was like total destruction of national sovereignty for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely insane. And that was Obama's and Hillary's baby. As if, these people are fronts for, so I don't know. How do you get rid of those people, the real people? And I don't think you do. You have to make some kind of a truce with them.
Yeah, I don't know because, even Obama and Hillary, Obama's another cutout too. He was groomed from a young age, to do what he did. Mm-hmm. And, he doesn't make any decisions. He's a teleprompter reader and he's rather good at it.
No, and when he doesn't have one, he can't talk.
He stutters a lot. And, yeah, and then it cracks me up when he says Michael.
Yeah.
Times.
Oh my God! And then
that's a little telling there, isn't it?
Michael is dancing with Ellen, and the balls are flapping against the hand. Oh my God!
Big Mike and Barry. Oh, well, for those who don't know what we're talking about, just Google it. You'll see what we're talking about. But that alone, that's a huge hoax, pulled on everybody.
And he wasn't even eligible to be president.
Yeah, not even an American citizen at all, but that didn't matter, and not even married to a woman, but that didn't matter.
You can see how satanic that all was.
Yeah, incredible.
Alchemical. It was like a satanic ritual presidency.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And they used that whole mechanism to the max. I mean, we saw the whole Russia hoax, and that whole thing that they launched against Trump. That was all weaponized through the, FBI, CIA, Department
for a whole bunch of commies, by the way.
Yeah, and they've been placed in these positions for so many years. This goes back decades for a lot of these people, and some of these people like Mueller and even Bill Barr. I mean, this guy's not going to help us in any way. His dad was heavily involved with Epstein, and
heavily involved. George, I don't know what to believe about what George says. Yes, he was the headmaster of the school who left the semester before Epstein started at Dalton. I actually knew people who went to Dalton, probably back exactly when Epstein was there.
But Epstein, wasn't he hired to be a physics teacher? And he had no background in that as far as...
He was a math teacher. And then it gets, he knew some physics and he got into physics. But I think he was maybe he did math and physics. Yeah. Yeah.
But Bill Barr himself was a fixer for Daddy Bush, That's pretty common knowledge.
And Mueller covered up the Iran-Contra thing. He covered up 9/11. And he covered up one other thing before he covered up Spygate.
Oh yeah, and these people have long histories of criminal activity, and here they are. They're still walking around, and no problem.
Yeah,
and that's really what we're up against, because it's so ingrained in all of these different systems of so-called authority, and with the marriage of the mainstream media fully supporting and cooperating with that whole agenda, it makes it really difficult for us.
Right. And then it's not even, it really is a transnational thing. I think you see a lot of it is Chinese propaganda, and some of it's Qatari propaganda. And almost none of it is Russian.
Right, exactly. You get an idiot like George Soros in the middle of this funding, who scammed the Wall Street and all these other money markets to make his money. And he's just a front for the Rothschilds. Yeah, and he's, his groups around the world are, behind all of the nastiness that we see on the streets. We've got Antifa and all that kind of stuff, and the media companies, many of them are being held up by these same people. And it's an uphill battle that we have, but it's one that we have to fight, and it's worth fighting. And we just have to do it. We don't really have a choice here, because if they continue on with the direction that they want to go, I mean, we're just going to be total drones, It's
going to be Stalin, a technocratic Stalin on steroids. Literally, we're going to be zombies hooked into the Internet of Things with smart dust.
Yeah, and that's, are you familiar with Ilana Freeland?
Yes.
And her work is the total and complete, how does she put it? The complete full spectrum domination of...
Down to the DNA level.
Of everything. And that's their ultimate goal. And that is hand in hand with this whole transhumanist thing. And, that's a scary thought. And that's a place that we don't want to go. And we're already a long ways there. Yeah. We've already been dosed with the nanotechnology through the chemtrail spraying and all of that.
Yep.
But it occurred to me one time that as much as that's a scary thing, as far as what they could do if they decide to turn that on wholesale, across the world, is that if the people in the that had good intentions had that, it could also be used in another direction to wake people up.
Hopefully. I mean, the thing is, it has read and write capacity. It'll start out only having read, though. That's what Elon Musk said. Yeah. So it'll make everybody maybe very telepathic for a while in the beginning. Then it'll start control. Once the AI gets good and gets to understanding mass consciousness, then it'll start having write capacity. So we have to disarm it before that happens.
Yeah, and if any writing occurs, it's the writing of the truth. Yeah. Now that could be really awesome. I mean, if you think about it, if we were able to get our hands on that technology and just inform the people, that's a game changer too. So I kind of hold out hope for a few things like that are possible. But all right, so we're talking about Trump. Where do you think that's all going now? I mean, we see that, we're all waiting for some of these criminals to possibly be arrested, but it just doesn't seem like it's going that way.
Yeah, we were, after the Mueller report came out, and it was a flop because, you see like what a Keystone Cops operation the whole thing was. We were told, Hannity told us every night that it was going to happen, the D class and the whatever. And like, I don't know, basically what like the X-22 report is saying, and everyone really, is that there's only one shot, like one news cycle to do this, apparently. And they have to get it right. It has to be completely airtight. It has to be completely, there's no other, conclusion other than to prosecute and jail and possibly execute people.
Yeah, and there's plenty of them that deserve that. That's
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. I've never been big on capital punishment, but what they've done to me in my relationships and my ability to earn a living, my inability to have a family life, it's, everything looks like, it's not a war, but my life is a war. It's a total.
Oh, there is most definitely a war on humanity. It's the parasite class against the humans.
Yeah.
And, I've discussed this with other guests, and I suspect that there are, I don't know what you call them. I don't even know if they're human, but there are beings that live a lot longer than us, and they're able to carry on their program and have it consistently be executed slowly, boiling frog again, over time. And there hasn't been a huge rush, although lately things have somewhat accelerated because of the fact that a lot of their stuff is being exposed. So I'm sure they feel like they have to accelerate things now. They don't have any choice because the Pandora's box has been opened.
Right. So, we might just all get nuked to make it all go away. I don't know.
So yeah, like somebody's going to press the master reset button, which has occurred before. And, this game is just not going well. So we'll just press the reset button and start over and hopefully do better the next time, and on some level, it just seems like, this is a big spiritual test. It's a big spiritual school. And so we're confronted with all this evil and all these terrible things. And I feel like we have to prove our mettle in some way. We have to stand up and, we have to have a moral compass, and we have to stay with it, and it's a test. I really feel that way. I don't know how you feel about it.
Well, I mean, there's no choosing whether I'm staying with it or not. I'm just totally committed. That's just no question about that. But I have to say, it really has been so devastating. I'm really I'm a walking wounded person right now. I'm not okay.
Yep. And we need to turn that around. So anyway, we're coming up on the break once again. We've got one more segment coming here with Alexandra Bruce. We're so happy to have her. And we'll be back in just a few minutes. Stick around with us. Okay, welcome back once again to our final segment of the show today. We're with Alexandra Bruce. And Alexandra, something you had mentioned before about your the special forces guy that you had some discussions with. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Okay, so I have a subscriber friend who is a retired special forces Marine who was. I think that the Marines kind of have a special relationship with the executive branch. Like they get that other, the Army and the Navy don't have. Like basically the White House tells them what to do, can tell them what to do. And so he ended up being in hit squads, killing people for George Bush Sr.
Oh.
And so after he did that, and he thought it was great, and then he came home from a deployment, and he had a daughter who was sort of walking and talking for the first time, and she grabbed his leg and said, "Daddy, I love you," and he was like, oh, and he was like, he couldn't go back. He couldn't do that anymore.
He realized what love was all of a sudden, huh?
Exactly. It was exactly. It was like a completely like a lightning bolt experience. And so he went back because he'd been a ticket runner. He's from New Jersey, and he had worked on Wall Street as a ticket runner. And so he became, he doing, financial management,
mm-hmm.
and, really getting into bond and currency trading, while he also had an asset recovery, business too. Like, so doing things privately that he would have done, while he was in the Marines, like extracting drug dealers and trying to get the DEA to pay them millions of dollars, for mm-hmm. something like an El Chapo. It wasn't El Chapo. Maybe it was, or it wasn't, another big guy.
Yeah.
So he said that, basically from his experience on Wall Street and from, black ops, he was introduced. He was in Switzerland, and he actually got to meet some of the people at the very top who were involved, with the Bank of International Settlements. And he described them. He says they were almost like invisible. They were he uses the word mundane to describe them. They do not live ostentatiously. You would never know that they're trillionaires or more. Money is not a thing because they are money. They control the right to issue worldwide. They have the ultimate choke point on the planet, which is money.
Mm-hmm.
And he says you would never know by looking at them. They're like the most boring, they're like the non-player character,
NPC money people.
And he knows that they have agents in everywhere, any corporation of consequence and every media corporation of consequence. They have an agent there, and it could be either, because all of our intelligence agencies basically work for them.
Yeah.
They work for the United States, for the people of the United States. And so there's this whole other level of reality where it's like MI6, with the Five Eyes thing, it's just like, yeah, it's all one thing pretty much.
Yeah. It's their intelligence group.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the essence of the deep state, is that
it's transnational. It's a transnational pox, and it's these intelligence agencies working for the central bankers. That's what it's about.
Yeah, in our world, everything boils down to the money. It's who's got the money, who can pay to
right, and that's the system. They made these rules, and we have to play by. That's their rules, and we have to play by them. That it's all about money.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, whether it's about the transgender agenda or if it's about everyone's a racist, or that's all coming down from their think tanks and whatever. And it's just, at this point, it's just a psychological warfare. It's such garbage. It's so, I really try to ignore it, but when I really go there, it really hurts. It hurts me.
It does. Well, it hurts anybody who's a thinking being, because we are literally at war. It's on every possible level. It's on a very physical level because of the poisoning of our food systems and our water and our air. It's poisoning us on a social level, on an intellectual level, because of the news medias and the schools and the religions and all that. And that it directly ties in with a spiritual level as well. And it is warfare. It is truth and godliness against evil. That's what it boils down to. That is what's happening right now. And it's being magnified greatly because of all the things that are being exposed. But we are literally at war with these people, or whatever they are.
Right. And then there might be, just like everything, it's kind of all, everything is, there's only one thing going on, right? And, where the solar system is moving through a highly charged particle area of the galaxy that was not like when we were born, it wasn't like that. So the gas giants are getting excited, but sort of they're glowing more, but they're tamped down. Like their EM fields are tamped down, but their luminescence is greater. I don't know, something like that. And so we're going to go into, we're seeing a solar minimum. And we're going to see, I think, a cooling effect. So the whole global warming thing is kind of hilarious because it's not happening. And yeah, sea levels changed. Florida's been up and down, in and out of the water, I don't know how many times. That's just what happens. But, these people, I don't know that they're just so obsessed with control that they maybe don't pay attention to getting all the science correct.
Mm-hmm.
Or they pay off some people to, the guy, by the way, who Al Gore based his whole thing on, committed suicide, like recently, like last week or something.
Oh, great. Yeah. And Al Gore, along with the Obamas, have places right on the water.
Exactly.
And they're so worried about those ocean levels coming up, but yet not that much because, they live right on the water.
It's so gross.
It's so insane. And I am always saying, I truly wish we could get a bigger voice. I wish we had one of those mainstream media outlets that we could get information out there, but we don't. So we just have to continue doing what we're doing, and we can't stop. We can't let up. And fortunately, there's a lot of us doing it now, and that I'm very happy to see that.
Do you post this show on YouTube?
Yes.
Good. Well, I'll run it.
Great. Yeah, it's so important that the more people that can grasp this information and realize actually what's going on, we have a better chance of standing up against it. And it's really, to me, it boils down to our best defense is non-cooperation. And by that, I mean, don't do evil. If you're a military guy and they want you to, they send you out and say, go kill these people, and they haven't done anything to anybody, it's not in self-defense, don't do it. But that only works if we do it together, if we all do it together, because, when one person stands up and tries to do the right thing, we see what happens to them. And it's really difficult for a military guy or a policeman or anybody, the militarized police that we have, it's very difficult for them to stand up and do the right thing. A lot of them know what's right, and they know that a lot of what they're being forced to do now is not right. But again, they think, well, I got to make a living, I got to support my family, got to support myself, and I'll just look the other way on some of this stuff. But we can't let that continue. We've got to. Hopefully, there's enough people that do have a moral compass that we can, achieve something like that. I don't think we're there yet, but that's why we have to keep going.
Yeah. Well, it's like every week, it's just another slog to try to, squeeze a few shekels out of some affiliate marketing thing. It's just, I can't even tell you how rugged it is out here trying to pay the bills. It's just, like I said, I was deplatformed twice this year. And there's a scam, there's a thing called the honeypot scam, and I bet you Soros or a Soros type entity owns this honeypot scam that was one of my deplatformings, which is it's called Spam Cop, where they buy up all of these sort of unused addresses.
Email addresses you're talking about?
Yes, email addresses. And if you start sending to them, they flag you and call you a spammer.
Oh, wow.
When that address was subscribed to you, they did subscribe. I mean, I don't engage in any kind of fraud. This is how I make a living. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
So, but they call me a spammer now. So I lost 30,000 contacts that way.
Oh, and that's such a setup.
Yeah.
That's such a setup. Oh.
And then the next one is I moved to MailChimp. So I moved from Constant Contact to MailChimp. And then a month and a half into that, I sent a video about 9/11, and it was like, boom. They wouldn't even tell me why. They just said, you have to go.
Well, all those big platforms, MailChimp and Constant Contact, those are probably the biggest email platforms. Mm-hmm. We have to know that they're controlled and manipulated, just like everything else out there that's going to have an effect.
Right. It took a while.
Amounts.
Because they went after. Well, they seem to go after just trying to demonetize ads first, and then they start. So they just demonetize, and then they started to actively deplatform people off of YouTube, and then or deplatform them from AdSense. There was also, the banks are doing it. PayPal was doing it. They first did it with Julian Assange way back in 2010 or 11.
That's right.
And so Visa and Chase were bad, and PayPal. And so what's not, so it took a while for the mass emailing services to get, and that happened this year.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that they got plugged into that same AI system that's used in social media now, and it's becoming more widespread, so that all these other companies can use the same types of algorithms to identify enemies of the globalist agenda, which is what it boils down to, right?
Yeah, they crank it up. They set up. There was the New Zealand bombing. I think my thing was in response to the New Zealand attack. So that's when the rash, they make a thing and then they do a rash of deplatformings after, like 8chan. 8chan is still down after, being blamed for, meanwhile, people on Facebook have live streamed murders. Why is Facebook not shut down?
Because it's part of their system and it's blatantly obvious, right?
Right.
But, we can all see that.
The guy, the owner of 8chan, the day before yesterday, on Friday, was subpoenaed or whatever. He met with Congress or whoever, and I don't know if it was the DOJ or Congress, but they asked him, because they've been meeting with Zuckerberg and everybody, okay, and then so they asked him how much he grosses annually, and he said $12,000. And they're like, what? And then they asked him like incessant questions about Do you have any Russians on your website? Do you have propaganda? Russia. It was like nonstop Russia.
Oh, they have to keep beating that dead horse. It's unbelievable. And you'd think if anybody had half a brain, even, on the Democrat side, they would be able to see that these people are like drones. I mean, that Nadler guy, I mean, I don't know what he is, but I don't think he's human. It's
so
bizarre.
That's for me, that is the the biggest letdown of all in all of this, is that people who I love, I have no respect for anymore. I think that they're idiots, and it's really horrible when your loved ones are idiots.
Tell me about it. Yeah, I've experienced that myself. It is very difficult.
It's just, you're being, talk about being atomized and being completely, shut out from the most important people to you. It's horrible. It's so horrible.
All right. So what's our tactic?
It's bad enough to have everyone, your parents die. It's bad enough to not be able to make a living anymore. And then the straggling relatives that are still alive are fucking idiots, and they're the only people you have left. It's horrible. I'm really not in a good place right now.
I feel for you. I really do, because I totally get it. I totally understand. But you also have to realize that you're having a very positive impact on the world, and that you're helping a lot of people to wake up. And there are a lot of us out there who really respect you and admire what you do. And I know that's a small token in spite of, all the other negative things, but you are having an impact. And I think that you can be at least somewhat happy that people do appreciate you.
Yeah, I mean, I get more appreciation, but people are even deranged on my list. The thing is, like I said, I was a registered Democrat. I voted for Obama when I started publishing my newsletter. And, I noticed I had a lot of right-wing, real fundamentalists and all kinds of weird denominations I'd never heard of. They use different iterations of Jehovah, different one, like 3 different ones, and you're like, what? Who are these different sects? What's going on? But God love, the thing is, there are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Christian people, and that's what started to really open my eyes about it, because, as one of these very liberal elites, that I was one of those people. And, I thought they were stupid, and now I don't. Now I think that they are much more important and valuable to the integrity of humanity than certainly the elites are.
Well, they're one of the few groups that have actually stepped up and done their best to, share truthful information. There's very few groups you can think of, religious or political groups that have stood up at all. And the Christian community certainly is doing that, and you have to admire that.
Yep, I do. And so it's just, like I told you, alien underground bases, aliens, time travel. I've been writing about this stuff for 20 years and experiencing it on some level all my life. But nothing has been more just completely mind-blowing than to peel back the whole liberal thing. Mm-hmm. To peel back what it is to be a Democrat now. I mean, it's because they really shifted too, but it's always been there. Like, I see myself, like, as I said, I mean, I was basically an Antifa person in my 20s.
Well, that's part of the whole technocracy thing has been going on for over 100 years. I mean, that's when they really started planning this stuff. And James Corbett has made some really good documentaries on this. And they are carrying out their agenda, and we see it unfolding in front of us every day. And we just have to get people to see it for what it is and not cooperate with it. Right. But there's too many people that can be bought. That's the sad thing.
That's really what's going on. And that's what you're seeing it in the governments. They'll sell out their whole country and hundreds of millions of people
Yeah, and if it's not selling out, it's they're being forced into certain things because they're being blackmailed.
Right.
And that was part of the whole Epstein thing was, one of his little operations was to, get people in compromising positions, videotape them, and oh, by the way, we need you to do this, and if you don't, we're going to show this video to your wife and family, and so you better do what we ask you to do, and that goes on all the time, and whether people are tricked into it, or some of them are just drugged and they don't even know what's going on, but they still got videotape of them doing something crazy. And, that is also a major contributor to what's going on.
Is to look at somebody like Jerry Nadler and how like zombie-like and bizarre he is. I mean, that is either like a wicked blackmailing or a wicked, bribe situation.
Or he's just flat satanic, demon-encrusted being.
Right? All of the above.
Yeah, that guy is scary to me. I mean, he's unbelievable. And who's that other one?
Adam Schiff.
Yeah, Adam Shifty Schiff. He's another one that's scary. I mean, that guy just blinks and blinks like he's like a android or a robot or something.
He's got the bug eyes and
he's got the bug eyes. The bug eyes is always a big giveaway to mind control, as far as I've noticed, through the years. Mm-hmm. And I met Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips back in the early 90s, and we talked about stuff like that and some of the sort of dead giveaways of mind control. And when you see people like that, when you see the bug eyes, like AOC is another one.
I want to see the bottom, the whites of below the iris.
Mm-hmm.
The whites below the iris is a sign. I was friends with them too back in the mid 90s, starting in the mid 90s. I have some autographed books of theirs. Mark and Kathy.
Yeah. Oh, they were such great people, and Mark passed not too long ago. And
last year.
I'm telling you, those people are salt of the earth, and I love them dearly. And
yep.
They're fighters, and Mark was a hero, a true American hero. And
I'm concerned about her. I haven't, I have a friend, Daniel List, who interviewed her a year or two ago, but mm-hmm. I haven't heard of her since he passed away, and I'm wondering how she's, living.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and get a hold of her and get her on the show if I can. I've seen some things on Facebook where I think recently she did an interview with somebody, so I'm gonna try and follow up and get her on the show, because she has so much great knowledge, and she's incredible. She's incredible. The strength that she has, and she's been telling her story for literally 30 years here, and her daughter was also very much involved and used and abused in so many ways too, and that was tragic. The whole
reason why the book got published, because that was actually their deposition.
Yeah,
it was they wouldn't allow them to present that, so their lawyer said, "You better publish it then, quick."
Exactly right. Anyway, Alexandra, we're getting close to the end of the show. Please tell people how they can get a hold of you, how they can support you. And I encourage everybody to subscribe to the blog, as I do.
Okay, it's forbiddenknowledgetv.net. And there is beneath the video screen, like when you get on the site, if you scroll down on the upper right beneath the video screen, you can put in your first name and your email address to get one email from me per day. One article per day with the video per day. So basically I follow the best truth tellers. It's what has become more. I used to have more of a science blog. It's become more about the revolution as being televised in a way.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alexandra. And I urge everybody, please support her in any way that you can. And we hope to have you back on soon. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Inside the Matrix. Until next week, we'll see everybody. Take care.
This is Inside the Matrix, hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Jimmy Brent. Jimmy Brent. Live every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
It is worldwide.
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location deep within the neon capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. For more information on the host and the show, please visit InsideTheMatrix.org. That's InsideTheMatrix.org. It's time to break the chains of manipulated consciousness and claim our true nature as creative, divine beings. Inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.